We went over some basic JavaScript features, gained knowledge of control structures, and even were able to write a simple number guessing game. Keep up the good work, friend, and follow along with this video where we will look into how functions work in JavaScript. Oftentimes, we need to repeat the same action in different parts of a program. Let's say we need to trim spaces in user string input and convert it to lowercase. In order for us to not be repetitive and not rewrite same code over and over, in programming there exists a concept of functions. It gives us that convenience of being able to grab a block of code, give it a name, and call it again many times by just referring to it with function name. As everything else, it is best explained with example, so let's have a look. Here's what we need to declare a function. I'm just gonna say function display greetings, alert, welcome user. So in the beginning here, we use a keyword function. After that follows a function name, then a list of function parameters in brackets. For now it is empty. We'll have a look at another example in just a bit. And then in curly braces over here, we have a function body. In order for us to call this function, we need to refer to it by its name. I'm just gonna say display greetings and then put the brackets after it, semicolon, save, refresh, welcome user. So what happened is the code in function body just got executed after we called the function. Let's look at a few details in how functions are implemented in JavaScript. Functions have access to variables outside of its scope. Let's see an example. I'm gonna say let username, and it will be John. Inside the function, I'm gonna say welcome username. And let's see if it works. Welcome John. Great. Functions have full access to those variables outside of their body or so-called scope. This over here. Functions can modify values of those variables. So if I were to say username Jack, it will indeed be changed to Jack. Let's refresh. Welcome Jack. However, if inside the function we declare a variable with the same name, the one outside the function scope will not be considered. So if inside over here I will say let username Jack, it will use this value of a variable we declared inside the function. However, this one on the line 3 will remain unchanged. And to confirm that, I'm just gonna throw another alert statement over here. After the function call, I'm gonna alert username. Save and refresh. Welcome Jack. And John is the second alert statement, which is the initial username. Let's see how parameters work. This time I want a customized message for a different user depending on how I call it. So I'm gonna tweak the definition of this function over here. I will say first name over here. I'm basically right now just giving this function parameters, last name. And these two parameters, the way they are defined, they become variables inside the function scope over here. Basically the same thing if I were to define them over here. If I were to say let first name equal John, same thing happens just here. These parameters, they will let us pass dynamic values into the function body. So let's just see how this example works. I'm gonna say welcome John, welcome first name, plus space, plus last name. We don't need this anymore. And right now, this is where the real magic happens. I can say display greetings for John Smith. Refresh. Welcome, John Smith. Or I can say display greetings for Jackie Chan. And we'll see two alert statements right now. Welcome, John Smith. Welcome, Jackie Chan. Awesome. Look at how much flexibility this gives us. I can now reuse a whole bunch of code and parameterize it for different scenarios the way I want. It's awesome. If parameters are not provided in a function call, their values will be undefined during function execution. Let's just see this. I'm going to erase one of them and take this out. Let's just see what the output is. Welcome, undefined, undefined. String conversion happened for those two undefined values, and that's what we see. It will not necessarily lead to an error as you are developing, but it might be a good idea to give default values to those function parameters. I can say first name equal maybe dear, and last name user. Let's refresh. Welcome, dear user. Awesome. Not only functions can modify values, they can also return values. Let's say we're building a shopping cart for internet store. The store operates in different provinces or states, and the percentage of tax that users pay on their purchases may be different depending on where they are. And I suggest that we write a function that calculates the amount of tax users pay. So let's define it. Function get amount with tax. And I'm going to say first parameter is going to be the amount. Second parameter, maybe tax percentage. Function body. To return a result, I will use a return directive. I'm going to say return amount plus amount divided by 100 times tax percentage. And to show you exactly what I mean by function returning values, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna say amount, and in the variable I will store the result of this function body execution. I'm gonna say get amount with tax and maybe $20. The tax percentage in Ontario is 13%. Save and alert amount. I think right now the output will not be as pretty, but let's just see how it looks. 22.6. Perfect. If we have different amounts, maybe $25, we may need some rounding. 28, 25. Perfect. Just to be safe, I will store this in a variable inside a function. Const amount, since it's not going to be changed. Exactly that. And the return value will be amount to fixed. This is just a nice trick that we can do. This is a function that JavaScript has in its implementation. We can round the amount to 2 decimal places in case the result of this operation, this mathematical operation, returns more decimal places in the number. Let's just refresh. See, this error over here says amount has already been declared, and indeed it is true. Amount is already one of our parameters. We cannot do that. We should say maybe calculated amount and return calculated amount to fixed. 28, 25. Perfect. This over here is just another fantastic example of how much flexibility we get with functions and function parameters. Now our code is becoming much more readable and logical. A few remarks that I need to make here: that return directive can be located in any part of a function body. Return directive can be used without any values as well. Let's say we have a scenario in a particular case when we want to stop the function execution and not return anything. We can just say return and nothing will happen. The return value of this function will be undefined and function will stop its execution. Refresh, undefined. So as we see, for function to work, return directive doesn't really need to return anything in particular. And after the return directive is reached, no more code will be executed in the function body. So if I were to say alert after return directive, we will not see this alert statement trigger. Let's refresh. And it is undefined. No trigger of our message, as expected. Functions are usually actions, and it is very important to make sure that function names are meaningful and self-explanatory. It often makes sense to use a verb in a function name, like over here, get amount with tax. It can be show something, or calculate something, or check something, etc. Another important tip for you is that a single function should be responsible for a single action. Two independent actions usually require two functions. Function that calculates amount with tax should not be also updating the card or doing something unpredictable if it is called get amount with tax. And if you have a lot of logic to reuse, it would usually make sense to break it down into a few small functions and possibly maybe call them in another bigger function. We'll be using functions a lot going forward, so stay tuned.